This is Kevin Conroy, the voice of Batman. And you're listening to the DCAU Review, hosted by Cal and Liam, streaming at DCAUreview.com and on your favorite podcast app.
On the mean streets of Gotham City, a new breed of supervillains emerges. But deep in the shadows, old school justice awaits. And the Batman, the Caped Crusader, returns in an all-new animated series. The Batman. You won't even see it coming. This is it.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 214 of the DCAU Review. I am Cal, one of your hosts, and with me, my good friend, good brother, the man that runs our Twitter account. That's right, Liam. Liam, welcome to episode 214 of the DCAU Review as we continue in our month of Robin the Boy Wonder Elseworlds episodes.
That is right, Cal, and we are picking up with another alternate animated take on the Boy Wonder himself. This week we are turning to the world of the Batman, not that one, and we are picking up with the premiere of the fourth season of that show entitled A Matter of Family.
Yeah, no Robert Pattinson to be found in this one. Sorry, Pattinson fans. This is the cartoon, the Batman, the follow-up series, the often overlooked, I feel like, and nowadays I feel like it's started to gain a little bit of traction and appreciation, but it was certainly between a rock and a hard place having to follow the Batman, the animated series in DCAU world. So we will definitely get into that. We've covered a few of these episodes from this show in the past. You can check those out in the archives at DCAUreview.com or on your favorite podcast app. Liam, before we get into this week's episode, we are of course going to get our IMDb synopsis, the official one, that is, for this episode that originally debuted back on September the 23rd, 2006, meaning we are coming up just a few short months here on the 16-year anniversary of this show. And before we get the official IMDb synopsis, I must remind you, as well as the listeners at home, that this segment is sponsored by The Pod Tower. Head over to youtube.com/The Pod Tower, and you will not only get amazing DCAU and Elseworlds content from yours truly, and what's the companion to yours truly, like ours truly, ours truly, yeah, okay, from ours truly. No, that still doesn't sound from us. Not only will you get it from us, but some wonderful content creators as well. So check out youtube.com/The Pod Tower, like and subscribe, get our full catalog, including bonus episodes and other Elseworlds episodes as well.
Absolutely. And so this is the synopsis for A Matter of Family, which was written by Michael Jelinek with direction by Brandon Vietti, music by Thomas Chase, and animation by Dong Wu. And that synopsis reads as such. When the circus comes to Gotham, ruthless crime boss Tony Zuko demands protection from the Flying Graysons. That's poor sentence structure, a family of trapeze artists. They refuse to pay, and Zuko exacts revenge, leaving Dick, the youngest Grayson, an orphan. Having experienced a similar tragedy, this thing is a paragraph. Having experienced a similar tragedy himself, Batman is driven to take down Zuko, and in the process discovers an unexpected bond with Dick.
All right. So you know how that popular saying was, or is, or has been over the last couple of years, like they understood the assignment. They knew what was asked of them. The person that wrote this synopsis did not understand what a synopsis is. a sentence or two that describes briefly what the episode is about. So I would say this again gets a see me after class. You didn't understand the assignment. You didn't follow the directions. So this is like a D- or with a see me after class.
Yeah, this is while it does convey the information of the plot of this episode, it does so in a pretty clumsy and poor sentence structure, and just too long, just too drawn out, a lot of padding in there. So That could jump us into our plot here, Cal. And well, if you're familiar with the origin story of one Richard Grayson, a lot of this will be familiar to you. We start out in the circus before the show has started, and we actually start on the Flying Graysons, John, Mary, and Dick Grayson eating dinner. Dick excited to go and practice the trapeze act before the show later in the night. But when he arrives in the big top, as his parents sort of slowly come behind him, they run into some familiar names, though these versions certainly don't look exactly the same as the ones we may have seen in other animated versions of this. But yes, it is Tony Zuko and some of his other brothers, as he refers to them, who are looking to do a little good old-fashioned mob shakedown.
Dick, your father said to wait.
Looks like the circus is in town. Tony Zuko, welcome to Gotham City.
John Grayson, the circus manager. Can I help you?
I'd like to think I'm here to help you, John. For a small fee, my brothers and I will provide your circus with protection.
Protection? I'm not sure I understand why we would need your protection.
I come from circus folk myself, so let me put this in terms you can understand. You don't pay us, and you'll have to deal with a strong man. A lion tamer? And a juggler.
Promising John, who in this version is the proprietor of the circus as well, that nothing bad will happen so long as the Graysons pay up to Zuko and the rest of his family. And John and Dick especially don't take kindly to that.
That's right. Yeah, John is not a pushover in this iteration of the Graysons. He doesn't take kindly to Zuko, who, by the way, Zuko's voice sounded oh so familiar, and so did John's. Just could not put my finger on where I'd heard these voices before, but I guess we'll find out in the voice in our voice cast reviewed at the end of the episode. But so these two gentlemen begin a fisticuffs. John fights back, showing that he is not a pushover, and just when it seems that the Zukos have gotten the best of them, Dick warns them that he, in fact, has called the authorities and that they are likely to want to stop. And from above comes a voice saying that he has intercepted said phone call to the authorities. And it is none other than, of course, the Batman. And the Batman does his best to clean their clocks and remove them from the circus tent. On the way out, Zuko locks eyes with Dick, and as they sort of run with their tails between their legs and escape, they do manage to arrest one of the members of the family, and this leads Tony to want to exact revenge and realize that since their family has been divided, that he wants to return the favor. So the rest, the next scene plays out like you've probably seen if you're familiar with, as you said, with Batman lore. You're familiar with how the next scene plays out. Bruce Wayne attends, in this case, the Flying Grayson's performance at the circus. And as he looks on right before they go out, it's interesting, at least in this iteration, which sort of mirrors at least the way that they sort of did it in the movie Batman Forever, the classic, I'm sure, multi-award winning film Batman Forever, in which Robin is gifted a costume or Dick Grayson is gifted a costume that looks very similar to what you might know as the classic Robin costume. And he's even given the moniker of the Robin by his mom in that moment, much to his chagrin. None too pleased, and actually eventually his father suggests maybe they call him the Flying Squirrel instead. Dick fends it off and says that he's going to be teased and mocked at school and called a loser for having a name like that. So they go out to do their performance. And as I said, Bruce Wayne is in attendance, happily watching. And of course, also in the audience happens to be Tony Zuko and a few brethren that were not taken in by the police. And as they watch, he's actually eating some popcorn. Tony is, and he dumps into the strong man, his brethren that is a strong man, into his hands what appears to be two bolt fasteners or nuts that were used to fasten. There's a quick cut to show that the trapeze line that the Graysons are swinging on has these two hooks at the end, and the bolts would have held the hooks down, and the weight of both Mr. and Mrs. Grayson are beginning to cause those hooks to slide up. And just as Dick is about to jump on and is introduced before he's about to perform, he notices the hooks are slipping, and the Graysons, as they are known to do, unfortunately fall to their death, because they do this all without the aid of a net, as we were reminded. So
really, who's the real murderer here? Is it Tony's? Oh, I mean, it's Tony Zuko, but like the secondary cause here is hubris. I would have to say, and again, this is not exclusive to this version of the Graysons, to your point, but you just had a net. This wouldn't be a problem, you know.
I'm going to get to it.
Embarrassing, but
right. And I'll get to it as we go along here, but there are several plot holes, unfortunately, in the classic story of Robin. Everybody that tells the Dick Grayson story has a way of telling it, and it follows a very similar pattern. And because it follows that original pattern that was set in the original Batman comics, there are several plot holes that in today's world just really don't make a whole lot of sense when you think about it too much. So not why would you, what would cause you, like, why would you think that would entice people to come watch? Although I guess it's like a train wreck. You're hoping, it's like a NASCAR race. You go to it attending, hoping to see an accident. So I guess in some ways it brings in customers, but it's never been addressed why that was the thing that they chose to do without the aid of a net. Because if they had a net, the Robin wouldn't exist, I guess.
Well, yes, that is often the answer, I think, in comic books and superhero stories sometimes. And is for every pedantic question that you or I might raise, a lot of times the answer is because we wanted the story to happen. That's why it happened this way.
Precisely. So as I mentioned, the Graysons fall to their death, and we cut from Dick sort of recognizing that they have fallen to their deaths to him being sheltered at their funeral, and it is pouring down rain in the afternoon with Alfred standing by, and also Bruce Wayne. And that's where we get the sort of introduction. We actually covered this when we did our 5 best Robins, our 80th anniversary celebration of Robin in our bonus episodes. This particular scene, we talked about it, but it's a very touching moment that happens between Bruce and Dick as they sort of make this connection, and he realizes that their stories sort of align here in this moment, and he recognizes Dick's need, as he does in most iterations of the story, that Dick is in need of what he was not able to have as a child, and is looking to provide that for Dick here.
I miss them. It's just not fair. Anyway, thanks again.
His parents were all the family that boy had.
That's why I've decided to take him in, as a foster son, if he'll have me. I was lucky enough to have you to guide me through those dark days, Alfred. Dick deserves the same.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very moody scene, and it's clear that there's a lot of anger in Dick's heart, and and he's not he's not sitting well with this. Of course you wouldn't be, but it's just clear, and Bruce very clearly sees so much of himself, as does Alfred in Dick, and we see that Bruce decides he's going to adopt Dick as a foster son, and we see Dick arriving at Wayne Manor there, and immediately they cut again, similar notes to different Robin origins we may have seen over the years, but Dick is sort of in the big house alone at the big dining room table as he's sort of questioning where Bruce is, and Alfred is quick to dismiss him and tell him that Bruce is just a busy guy and he's got too much going on, and meanwhile Alfred heads down to the Batcave and once again mentions that Dick is looking for him and is sort of in need of a little bit more companionship, and Bruce sort of answers that his reason for doing this, again very similar to other versions of Batman dealing with this, is that he feels that the best way he can help Dick in this moment from an emotional standpoint is to bring his parents' killer to justice, so that Dick's childhood won't be so consumed with never having gotten that closure the way that Bruce's was.
Master Dick has been asking for you.
I can't sit back and wait for the police to link the Zukos to the crime.
Now that the boy is part of this family, I suspect he may need a father figure more than he needs a crime fighter.
The criminal responsible for my parents' death was never brought to justice, Alfred. That's a burden I won't let Dick carry. Boss Zuko and his brothers have been harassing Gotham business owners for years. So far, my only lead is a toothpick I found at the circus carrying traces of Zuko's DNA.
That would seem to only confirm what you already know. His involvement.
This specific brand of toothpick is carried in only 2 places in Gotham, Alfred. Garrett's Family Restaurant and the Ice Pick Club.
So there's sort of a noble fact, but it's also feels like Bruce also trying to insulate himself from having to have a conversation with like a 10-year-old.
Right.
So it's
like, oops, I adopted a kid.
It's a very Batman excuse to, I want to seek justice for him, but I don't necessarily know how to just like talk to him and make him feel welcome in this giant house. So we see Batman from there tracking down some leads on Zuko by, again, we get into some really fun like Batman detective stuff, which I don't feel like this show did a lot of. It was so much more focused on the really over-the-top villains and the action adventure and the big set pieces and all, certainly that we've talked about in some of the previous episodes that we've covered of the show. But here we see him testing a toothpick he found at the scene of the crime for DNA, and then figuring out that these toothpicks are only available at 1 or 2 clubs in the city, and so he goes there and sort of shakes down the local hoodlums who confirm once again that Zuko is kind of laying low, but who tells him that Zuko's 2 brothers, the strong man and the juggler, are still out shaking down local businesses, and so Batman is off to track down Zuko's whereabouts as he once again takes that as he kind of continues on the trail there, and we cut back there to the manor where Dick's kind of hanging around again. The manor still alone, and Alfred actually calls for him and takes him and shows him that in this one room in the manor, and it was kind of funny because it's like a really sweet moment, but it also is a little bit of a there's a callback to it later in the episode where Alfred reveals that they have this sort of giant portrait of the Graysons now hanging in this one room in Wayne Manor in front of the fireplace. And it's this really kind of sweet moment as once again Dick is sort of reiterating that he's very much still focused on revenge and on Zuko, specifically the verbiage used is getting what's coming to him.
Right. Yeah. It kind of reveals, it kind of makes you think that he might take the same avenue that we saw in Batman, the animated series, where he's seeking revenge and looking to perhaps pay back Zuko with vengeance as opposed to justice. So they do kind of give you that red herring there to make you think that he might seek to kill Tony Zuko, but we'll find out later on just the payoff for that. But as you mentioned, so that he reveals this picture, and Bruce, as Batman is shaking down Zuko's brothers, despite the fact that they're not willing to share exactly where Zuko's whereabouts are, he again uses detective work to find out just exactly where they are, as he notices that the strong man is eating circus peanuts. So he puts two and two together and realizes that Zuko is in fact hiding out at the circus. So as he's on his way to the circus, this is when we get that Dick himself is actually a bit of a detective. Well, it's kind of by happenstance it happens, but he can't sleep, so he walks down and he heads to the study where the painting of his parents are. So he sits there by the fire, and as he's sitting there, old Alfred, just the jig is up thanks to Alfred Pennyworth, who comes up through the clock, the grandfather clock, and Dick is there in the chair sort of observing him silently. Alfred doesn't quite have the Batman skills to know that there's somebody in the room, and doesn't notice that Dick is in this big wing chair. And so Dick heads over to the clock and pulls the lever, of course, and is transported down to the Batcave, where the door opens and he sees all of Batman's trophies, the Bat computer, the Batmobile, or not the Batmobile, I guess the Batplane. And then as he's standing there sort of looking around in awe, he hears the Batmobile pull up, which sends him into a hiding place in an attempt to hide from Batman. And as he comes out of his hiding place thinking that the coast is clear, who does he run into but Batman himself, who at that point Dick says the most obvious thing in human history, and it's like, you're and Batman takes off his mask and reveals that he's in fact Bruce. So that leads us to this conversation had between the three of them, Alfred, Dick, and Bruce, where Bruce sort of explains to Dick what he's been doing and why he hasn't been around. And Dick exclaims that he wants to be the one to serve and find Zuko, but Bruce says it's too late at that point to discuss, that they can discuss it at another time. It's time for bed, and it's too late. As he walks away, Dick mumbles under his breath, too late for Bruce, but not too late for Batman. So I don't know how he got out of under the watchful eye of Alfred at this point. I guess Alfred goes to bed. So Dick then sneaks back down, goes down to the Batcave, and presses one button on the Bat computer, which immediately tells him where Batman's location is, which is he recognizes is the circus, and he decides to meet up. Batman has started his detective work there and arrived, but unfortunately is knocked out and awakens tied to one of those knife throwing targets, those big wooden knife throwing wheels.
Mm-hmm. Morning, sunshine. You know, being here has really brought back memories. Believe it or not, once upon a time, my pops and I were in the circus. We were knife throwers. Well, I threw the knives, and Dad hoped I wouldn't hit him. It was quite an act, really. We put him on a board, just like the one you're on, and I'd say, "Ladies and gentlemen, please don't try this at home. I'm a trained professional." Then my dad would say, "I knew we should have given you piano lessons instead." Always good for a laugh.
Why'd you give up such a promising career?
Well, one day, I missed.
And we learned a little bit of backstory. Tony Zuko reveals that he himself was a circus performer at one point, a knife thrower. He and his father were a knife throwing act where he threw the knives at his father, and sort of reveals at the end that the reason why their act came to an end was that he missed one time, and sort of intimates that he killed his dad. So very interesting there. And just as he's about to throw, as he's telling the story, he's sort of pinpointing around Batman the different knives, and he throws a knife headed squarely for Batman's head, and a bag, a weighted bag, drops from the ceiling, a sandbag, just in the nick of time to deflect it, and we get the reveal of just who it was that cut down said sandbag.
That's right. So we get the first full appearance. No guff here where they try to explain how exactly he made this whole costume for himself.
Nope.
But because the earlier version, we see him in his he has the green pants and the red tunic with the R on his chest, but no sleeves or mask or cape. But he comes out in full force with the full Robin suit. And he's there, and he sort of overwhelms Zuko at first, kind of using his own acrobatic skills to keep Zuko on his toes. But at one point, there's a line that Zuko kind of hits him with. He's always talking and kind of saying something sarcastic, and has some sort of comment to Robin about how didn't your parents ever teach you any manners, and that sort of really throws Robin off his game as he kind of tries to rush in and fight Zuko hand to hand instead of sort of using that acrobatic skill that was working for him. And Zuko kind of immediately takes over and is seemingly about to maybe have Robin meet the same fate that his parents did. But thankfully, one of the knives that he had thrown at Batman was just close enough to those ropes that Batman was tied up by that he could use them to cut himself free and swoop in to save Robin at the last second. And Zuko's trying to get away. He, of course, climbs the ladder up to the top of the little platform where the trapeze once swung. And as Batman sort of spooks him and he begins to fall, Robin ultimately decides to save Zuko's life and have him face justice. And that sort of brings us to our final scene as Batman sort of asks Robin about that. He asks, you were so intent on Zuko facing, getting what was coming to him, but yet you still saved him. And Dick sort of just calmly says that's what was coming to him was justice. That's what he got. And Batman is sort of quick to mention that it's starting to seem like if Dick's going to stick around Wayne Manor, that Bruce Wayne may not be the best possible father figure for Dick, and Dick suggests that perhaps the Batman could fill that role instead. And we get Batman mentioning that he would need to have a name if he was going to go out and patrol the streets at night. And Dick looks down at the R on his chest and comes up with as he says, a family name.
Nice save. But I thought you wanted Zuko to get what was coming to him.
Well, he did, didn't he? Justice.
I've been thinking, Dick. I'm not sure Bruce Wayne has what it takes to raise you properly.
Yeah, kinda noticed he's never around. But if not Bruce Wayne, what about the Batman?
We'd have to give you a name.
How about Robin?
Like the bird?
It's a family name.
The dynamic duo is born here at the end of our episode.
Robin, like the bird. That's right. Yeah. So that's where we wrap things up here. So as far as a faithful adaptation to the Robin story with its own sort of twist on it, I think that this does a very, very good job of doing that. I really enjoyed it. I think it's fun. I think I have some issues with the Robin story, especially the Dick Grayson Robin story, because it's very odd that a grown man decides to allow, and they don't really tell you how old Dick is in this, but he can't be more than 13, I feel like, it's certainly doesn't seem to be much older than 13 in this. So a 13-year-old running around fighting crime, you really have to suspend disbelief. Like, I get it, you're already suspending disbelief with a man in a bat costume, a billionaire in a bat costume with gadgets and a secret lair under his mansion, but this just takes it a step further, that the Batman character is okay with putting children in like harm's way, and the fact that he did not put up any sort of, this Batman in particular did not have anything to say about like, hey, well, maybe this isn't a good idea to put a child in harm's way. I feel like at least the Batman the Animated Series tried to address that with Terry McGinnis as Batman and sort of kind of with Tim Drake as Robin, but it's always just this thing that you just kind of have to ignore, that this adult man is okay with having somebody that's essentially his son out running around fighting bad guys with guns and knives and homicidal maniacs. Like, he's just okay with that. Like, he's okay with it. It's fine.
It certainly brings up, and I think there's certainly different comic writers, different show writers over the years have kind of, I think, tried to look for a certain justification. I think a lot of times the version that people settle on, I know I've heard like Paul Dini talk about this, is the idea that it's less for Robin's sake that he does this, and more for Batman's sake, and more that he's looking to brighten up his own world, and so he brings this youthful exuberance into his world in a brightly colored costume, not to use as a decoy, not to use as a blunt instrument or a weapon, but just to sort of bring some happiness into his own life. And I think that you don't really get the sense that that's the case in this episode so much, though. It's more just, and again, I think part of that initial appearance always has to be that Batman doesn't give him a suit and say, let's go fight your parents' killer. Like, it always has to be that the kid forces the issue. Right. Like, I think that's definitely always part of it. So yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I think there's different writers and different versions of these characters will kind of find a justification, but kind of like what we were talking about earlier, the honest justification for it was a character created in 1940,
right?
That was, designed to appeal to children, and it wasn't necessarily thought that it would ever be put up against this scrutiny, or that even that these characters would still exist some 80 some years later. So I think that's the real answer, even if an in-universe answer is not quite as satisfying as what the truth is.
That's all valid. That's all fair. So I will say, grading this show, even if I don't agree with the Robin story, or have to, am annoyed by some of the disbelief suspension that I have to do, or the hoops that I have to jump through to recognize this as a realistic story. I would say that the telling of this is good. I think that the portrayal of the mob and them being the ones shaking down the Graysons, I like that they change things up. They, like I said, the fact that they kind of give you that red herring that Robin might seek actual vengeance and looking to kill Zuko, but at the last second, it turns out that, Bruce sort of underestimated his willingness to see justice, and that he sees that already in Dick and sees, potential for him. So I do like that. I like that they made the Graysons a little bit less passive and a little bit more aggressive towards the people that were coming after them, and they're the ones that are directly dealing with the Zukos versus just being collateral damage. I thought that was an interesting take on it. So I liked all of that. I think that at the end of the day, it's hard to put up against Robin's Reckoning, because that's such an iconic episode and has such a near and dear place in my heart. But I think this did a solid job. I ended up giving plot a 7 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I went a little bit stronger. I went 9 out of 10. I just think this one is really a home run. And I think, while I would absolutely agree, especially from a nostalgia standpoint, as we often do on our show, this episode does not mean as much to me as Robin's Reckoning does. It can't, because I saw it at a different age, at a different point in my life. But I think this does a really good job of telling a more succinct story by not using flashback, by just kind of having it all happen in the present at that time. I think it kind of creates a more interesting story. But despite it only being, one part and only 22 minutes, I think you really do feel like the tragedy of when his parents are killed, like, because you get those few minutes at the start of the episode where you see them being this loving family, and they're not only are they, as you mentioned, they're not necessarily pushovers or collateral damage, but also they're shown to have this truly deep love and admiration for each other, both the parents for each other, and of course both of them for Dick. So I feel like you really feel the tragedy with when Dick loses something. And I want to talk more about that in visuals, certainly. We can get to more comparisons. It's going to be a lot of comparing it to an all-time classic pair of Batman the Animated Series episodes by default, I think. But yeah, I just think overall, I think they do a really good job of making that moment feel tragic. He feels so alone in that moment when his parents are gone, and still kind of feels lonely when Bruce takes him in. And it's not until he finally has this moment at the end with Batman where they sort of agree to become this iconic pairing from 80 years worth of comics, that he starts to feel at home, and he starts to feel like he has a family again. So I love the structure of it. And then there's a lot of other reasons that play into it in our other categories. But yeah, as far as just an adaptation of a classic Robin origin, and then also adding in their own little tweaks to it, I think it's pretty much a home run.
Love it, man. That's great. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category then, the aforementioned animation and visuals here. So as you mentioned, Dongwoo is the animation studio responsible for this week's episode. So why don't you run through your highlights and what stood out for you?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to go, I think, to the trapeze scene, the death scene. And that scene in Batman the Animated Series in Robin's Reckoning Part 1 it's incredibly harrowing. It's mostly done in silhouette and shadow, and you just see the frayed rope hang down as this brilliant crescendo of music plays. Mm-hmm. It's incredibly haunting. But one of the things I think that they did well here is as it's happening, as you mentioned, there's a scene where Zuko sort of dumps his popcorn out, and you see these two lug nuts, and it keeps cutting to those hooks that are sort of ever rising, ever about to fall, and you have Mr. Grayson out on the trapeze, and then his wife swings out, and then you see the hooks begin to fray even more, and then right at the height of the swing of the upswing, you see it kind of cuts to the slow motion shot, and you see John Grayson realize it, and then you see Miss Grayson notice, mm-hmm. and you see her sort of just reach out to Dick in this very, very, I think, tragic and haunting way. And then very interesting to me is they then cut to like a POV shot of Mary as she's falling, and you just see from her perspective her outstretched arm as Dick on this little platform up in the sky gets further and further away from her. Mm-hmm. And then it cuts to the shocked crowd shots, again, something we saw in BTOS certainly. And then it cuts back to Dick, and it's just him sort of on his hands and knees weeping and sort of with his head down. And then you sort of it starts to sort of slowly zoom out, and you just see this little kid crying all alone on this platform. And just to really hit home like the isolation of what he feels in that moment, when his whole world has come crashing down. The way, the use of camera, the direction. Again, Brandon Vietti is the director on this episode, who folks will probably know. He's one of the big minds behind eventually of the Young Justice series, and went on to, I think, bigger and more sort of prominent work after this series. But the way that whole thing is framed, while it's completely different than the Robin's Reckoning version, I think is almost equally as haunting as that sequence of the shocked looks on his parents' faces to the POV shot to then the sort of slow zoom out of Dick all alone up on this platform. It's just really, really haunting stuff.
Yeah. I don't know if I can add anything to that. I would agree with you. That's always a tricky thing to do also, because that's unlike the murders of Bruce Wayne's parents, which most people already know that story coming in. So you can oftentimes just allude to or tell that story without showing it. If you're doing a Robin origin story, it's kind of pivotal because Bruce, in most, if not all, of the iterations of that story is present. So you kind of have to, it's kind of important to show that. So the fact that a children's cartoon has within its limits to work around showing the murder of Dick's parents, and the way to do that in a way that doesn't just show the murder of them, show them hitting the ground. It's always, like, pun intended, a tightrope to walk. So the fact that they were able to put their own spin on it, not just do the cut rope bit that the Batman the Animated Series did in Robin's Reckoning, and put their own spin on it. And I think it really builds the tension too, as they're swinging on it, just as it does in Batman the Animated Series, as the rope begins to kind of fray and eventually snap. This, you can, it's almost like I think it was Alfred Hitchcock said the way to get people in and feel tension in a scene is to have let them in on the secret of what's going to happen, like the what's building the tension. So you have a scene where there's three men sitting around the table and then a bomb goes off. Well, it's not as shocking and it doesn't create as much tension as if you start the scene under the table showing the bomb with the timer about to go off, and as the audience, you have this sort of this fourth wall of understanding of what's going to happen if these guys don't leave the table. So the fact that effective storytelling was used here too, where you see Zuko shows his brother the lug nuts, you connect that to the hooks on the trapeze, and then you start to see the trapeze go up. It builds that tension and anxiety and fear in you for these characters. So it's a great way of bringing the audience in and bringing tension in, a very effective storytelling device. So yeah, I agree that they did that as effectively and put their own spin on it. So yeah, and then the transition from that scene right to the funeral and the rain and Dick sort of there sitting with his head hanging down and the caskets there in front of him, and it was a very very effective way of communicating just the emotion of that scene. And I love what you said about the isolation of him being on that platform and just how he felt in that moment. Very, very, very well done. There's a lot to enjoy. I think I don't know if we've done an episode from the later seasons of the Batman yet, but this is one of the redesigns that they did for the Batman character, where they gave him the more square jaw, and they actually shrunk the eye slits on his costume. They sort of redesigned his costume, made his nose a little bit more prominent, and gave it a more definition. So this does look a little bit different than some of the other episodes that we've covered from this series so far. Bruce looks I think they even made his eyes a little bit smaller too, and gave him a little bit more square eyes instead of the rounder almond eyes that he had in the other episodes. So there is a little bit of a redesign here. You want to talk about the actual Robin design itself?
Yeah, so there's not I think we did talk about this we did the Batman Superman two-parter.
That's right, we did. You're right.
A while back, which Robin is in that one, but I don't know how much we talked about Robin in that one. But yeah, like the costume itself it looks pretty much like you took the I guess what at the time would have been the still pretty current Tim Drake Robin suit, not so dissimilar to what Batman the Animated Series do, where you take that original Neil Adams designed suit that was made for Tim Drake, and you kind of put that on into your animated style. It's a little more simple. You don't have like the pouches on the sleeves and things like that, but you got the green sleeves and the long pants. He does still have kind of like the little pointed pixie boots like the original suit, which I think is a nice little touch. And then he does, I guess you have the inverted color on the R. You have a black R with the yellow circle, which is kind of a nice little just change of pace there. And then I think maybe what it's about is the hue of green they use. They use like a very deep dark green on his on the green parts of his costume, as opposed to maybe other versions which would use a brighter green. So I think it fits in, because even though this show is not, it can be lighter at times and very action adventure heavy. There is, I think, especially in the Batman design, he's got this big, flowing cape that sort of engulfs him if he's not sort of actively moving or in a fight. It's sort of almost always completely around him. He almost completely obscures his body, if not completely. And so Robin's sort of having a little bit of a darker color palette on his suit to maybe match that. I think that works pretty effectively. And he has the cape that has like one little slit in it down near the bottom, but it sort of hangs over his shoulders and in the same way that Batman's does. So I guess they kind of match that from like a color palette and motif, even though it's still the, very much the classic Robin color palette with the black and yellow cape and the red and the green.
Yeah. My only issue with the Robin design, and it's more, I think, for the character model itself, is that he looks like a bobblehead, especially when he stands next to Batman, because Batman's head sort of fits his body. But I think it's the same issue with Batgirl also. Batgirl, for whatever reason, their heads are gigantic on the character models, and when you put them standing next to Batman, they just look even more like bobbleheads, and it's very distracting for me. So that end scene where they're standing, which is I love the end of the episode where he's telling him that Bruce Wayne's not going to be the best father figure for him, and then he says, well, how about Batman? And they're just kind of standing there, and there's this purple sky behind them. They got rid of that god awful green like baby poop green sky color, and it's like purple. There's a giant moon behind them. Their capes are flowing. #cape movement going there.
Oh yeah,
double cape movement at that. But Robin looks like a bobblehead, and it just took me out of the scene. I'm like, and I know that's, again, it's just the design, but it feels like I don't know, like almost like he belongs on a different show. That character model belongs to like a Teen Titans or like something where the character's a little bit more exaggeratedly designed, and Bruce is sort of, I don't know. It just doesn't seem to match for me. So I did not love that. But there's a lot of other classic Batman stuff that's in here. They have great use of batarangs, and I think that scene with Zuko throwing the knives, I love that. Batman tied up, and they follow the knife coming out of Zuko's hand to hitting the target, and the scene where Batman is shaking down the guys at the Ice Pick Lounge. He knocks on the lounge, and the guy asks him for a password, and before there's an answer, he just busts through the door, shaking people down, looking for Zuko. I loved that. I thought that the tour of the Batcave that Dick takes when he comes down the elevator was great. You see Batman's trophy room, which includes a whole bunch of stuff that we from episodes that we haven't covered just yet, but loved that. And I think there's some strong visuals. I think that the highlight is definitely, as you mentioned, the death of the Graysons, unfortunately, and then the subsequent funeral afterwards. I will say there was one visual Easter egg, and that is in the opening scene, there's a poster of the Flying Graysons, and the costumes that the Graysons are wearing on that poster are actually matching of what the costumes they wore in Batman the Animated Series in Robin's Reckoning.
Very nice. I didn't pick that up.
Yeah, it's almost it's the red with like the sort of the gold design on it and the white pants. I think there's a slight variation on Mary's costume, but the rest of the costume it's almost exact. So a nice little nod and shout out to its predecessor there, with a couple of other things that we'll talk about in just a few minutes here. But overall, the Zuko design, I liked that it was different. Also, he had the David Bowie 2 different colored eyes for some reason. Didn't quite understand why they went with that, but I guess it made him a little bit more menacing, a little bit more evil. And I think his strongman had sort of like that classic. He looked like a sad clown without the makeup on. He looked like some other cartoon character that I couldn't quite put my finger on. Like there's like a classic like homeless sad looking clown. Is that Bud Allen? No, it's Bud Abbott maybe.
Oh, okay.
I think maybe is the clown that sort of looked like that back in like the 30s or 40s or something like that. Tweet us at DCAU Review if you know what clown I'm talking about. But yes, it's maybe the same clown that was modeled after one of the masks in The Dark Knight, in the bank heist, scene. That one of those masks is modeled after one of those clowns. So it's the same face. But I gave animation and visuals a very strong 9 out of 10. What about you?
Yeah, I actually went the full perfect 10 out of 10 for my visual score. Nice. A couple other little notes. I think we mentioned this. There's a lot of use of slow motion. We already talked about it in the Grayson's death scene, but in that opening bit where the Zucos are kind of shaking down everything as Tony and the other ones run as Batman deals with the lion tamer. There's just this moment where Zuko sort of looks down at Dick, and they cut back to Dick and then back to Zuko as they lock eyes. I thought that was really impressive. And then actually in that same scene a little bit earlier when they do the bit where where Dick and John are sort of facing off with the Zucos, and Dick tells him that he doesn't think that they'll be paying him anything because he called the cops 5 minutes ago. And then you hear Batman's voice saying, "Guess who intercepted the call?" And then from out of the shadows, a very classic Batman moment, you just see the silhouette appear behind Zuko, and then you see the fist rise up, and he connects with that. Heck of an entrance for Batman at the start of this episode. Just tremendous stuff. Yeah. So I think that, as we already mentioned, that final bit in the circus tent with the knives throwing and Robin making the last second save as Zuko falls off the platform and all that's just really, really good stuff all the way around. So even though there's really only that opening little scuffle between Batman and the Graysons and Zuko's family, and then again sort of briefly Batman shaking down the thugs, and then that final action beat, it's not wall-to-wall punching and kicking here, but still a very strong visual score, which I think again speaks to how good they were at using the direction and using the animation to convey those big emotional beats of the episode.
Absolutely. And that's directly reflected in our scores. All right, Liam, let's move on to our next category, which is going to be music. And I believe you said Thomas Chase was responsible for this week's music. Mm-hmm. Yeah, mm-hmm. there's I guess we've done an episode. We'll just talk about it because I'd forgotten we'd done the Batman Superman story, but the new Batman theme, thumbs down. Like knock off Batman 66 theme with a little bit of, like, the guitar riff's great, but I just don't feel like it fits this version of Batman very well. It feels like it should go with Batman Brave and the Bold, or a Silver Age version of Batman. The original title by The Edge, far and away way better than what they landed on for these later seasons, but I digress. With that, other than that, I thought that the music, they used a similar trick, as we mentioned, in Batman the Animated Series, where the music sort of stops and then crescendos and comes back in when the Graysons pass. This, it sort of just abruptly comes, like, it just starts dropping out and just lowers to a lower level, but it stays kind of, it's not that it drops out completely, it just drops out of focus as the moment that they're passing comes about, and they zoom in on Dick, and then they zoom out and then transition to the funeral. But music plays a big background part in a lot of the scenes. The music at the nightclub, the ice pick lounge sounds, it's just like generic 80s rock ballad track number 4 that I was like, all right, that's not great, but I guess it's just they just picked a piece of music for the scene. But I did think that there were a couple of scenes, including, you know, when Dick comes out of the elevator and is sort of taking in the visuals of being in the Batcave for the first time. There's some music that comes in the back there. There's a little bit of a theme that I feel like came in or started to come in when Robin is revealed, but it just very quickly drops out. There's some synthesizer that comes in there. And then in that final scene, I notated the music also as he and Batman are having the conversation about who Robin is and what it being a family name. There's sort of a crescendo of a theme that plays there. But yeah, I think the music, there wasn't a lot that was required of it other than to kind of be the background, but it does certainly set the mood in the death scene and then in the subsequent funeral scene, and even in the scene where Dick is sort of can't sleep and looks up at the picture of his parents. I thought that that scene is punctuated by this sort of somber, sad music that is interrupted when Alfred comes from the Batcave and sort of leads to the scene where Robin or Dick discovers the Batcave and has this moment of awe. So the music, there wasn't anything that necessarily stood out as a piece that's hummable or memorable to me, or something that's gonna would be on a repeat if I had the tracks isolated. But I think it's solid and it does its job. So I ended up giving music a 7 out of 10.
Yeah, I actually went with the exact same score of 7 out of 10. Yeah, I think it's not that classic theme, a lot of like classic musical moments that you're gonna hum or anything like that, but definitely it's always very good at punctuating those scenes. You have the sort of echoey Batman guitar refrain when he comes into a scene, and as you mentioned, there's sort of this weird little synthesizer thing that plays when Robin first appears, and then you have your sort of your bookended music there as well. I think they did a really good job. And there's one moment where as Bruce is sort of looking down at Dick at the funeral, where he has a flashback to himself as a young boy looking at his own parents' grave, and I think there's some good music brought into that funeral scene as well. So yeah, even though it's not necessarily a great maybe traditional soundtrack that you would maybe seek out on a to listen to in isolated fashion, I'm not sure it's available even if you wanted to, unfortunately. But yeah, I think it does a really good job of just punctuating and adding to the emotions that we're seeing and we're hearing from our other categories there. So can't complain about that. A really good, really strong job there.
Absolutely. All right, Liam, we've been teasing it pretty much from the get-go here. We have some exciting names to discuss on this week's voice cast. So before we make the good people wait any longer for the surprise reveal of just who these voices are, let's talk about this week's voice cast.
That's right. So first, as a couple familiar names, although not the big familiar names we'll be talking about. We have playing the sort of the big bruiser henchman, the strong man, as he's referred to, is one Maurice La Marsh, who folks would know as the voice of the Brain on Pinky and the Brain, and one of the Animaniacs, I think, and tons of other voice acting credits to his name, of course. Not a big role, but always fun to see one of those veterans of Warner Brothers animation popping up. And speaking of veteran voice actors, we have Gray Griffin, who I believe at the time was known as Gray Delisle, as Mary Grayson, who folks would know as the voice of Catwoman in the Arkham games, and Mandy on Billy and Mandy. Again, a ton of Warner and then Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon cartoons to her credit as well. So I like and I will sort of parlay Miss Griffin's performance along with playing the voice of John Grayson, a fella I think we've brought his name up once or twice on the show, by the name of Kevin Conroy.
What?
Okay, Dick, come on out now.
No, I look like a loser.
Your mother put a lot of work into the new costumes. Well, are you gonna just stand there?
Is there a reason why this costume has to be so colorful?
Because when I see you up there, Richard, you make me think of a little robin.
Ugh, a robin? Like the bird? You know, kids my age get beat up for nicknames like that.
How about if we call you our flying squirrel? Better?
You know, Dad, I'm not the only one who looks like a loser.
Loser? Well, I'll teach you.
It's so funny because that's like the first voice you I think their two voices, Miss Griffin and Kevin's voices are the first two voices you hear in the episode practically, and it's just it's so funny. Like, and it's not that of course he does a great job. He's very over the top and really playing like the good loving dad throughout his couple of scenes here and everything. It's a lot of fun, but it is just so, like, in a good way. It's kind of just funny to hear Kevin Conroy voicing a character in a Batman cartoon that isn't Batman.
Yeah, I mean, we knew that he had this sort of doting father type voice because when he played Thomas Wayne in Batman the Animated Series, and it's very much like a turned up Bruce Wayne from Batman the Animated Series style voice, just kind of like goofy and over the top. I mean, I guess it's probably just Kevin Conroy. It's Kevin Conroy being happy and joyful, as opposed to the dark brooding Bruce Wayne that we're used to. So it is nice to hear his voice. I love the little scene that he has where he was teasing Dick about being named the Flying Squirrel. I thought that was great. I love that they decided to make him a instead of just this sort of passive guy that's a pushover that's sort of fears and is running away from the mob that's threatening to shake them down and wanting them for protection, that he actually stands up to them. And ironically, he puts up a pretty good fight and holds his own against some of these guys. He's only bested by the strongman who sneaks up from behind and beats him over the head from the back. So I love that they made this character very strong and masculine fella for Kevin Conroy to play. So I love that.
Love that. And speaking of the familiar names, they just keep coming this week as playing our main villain of the piece, the aforementioned Tony Zuko, is none other than a little unknown struggling voice actor known as Mark Hamill.
Whoa.
And
what?
I was gonna say this one, he's sort of has this very I wouldn't say stereotypical, but it's a mobster voice. He's got a little bit of that New York accent going, and he's got a little bit of a rasp to him. So it's very different than any other DC animated role that I can think of for Mark, whether that be, of course, the Joker or Solomon Grundy or Ferris Boyle or even the Trickster later on in JLU. This is he's definitely it's very I don't even think hammy is the word. He's very sinister and very, very creepy, but almost every word out of his mouth is like a kind of a play on words or a threat that isn't quite a threat, or he's just got this real sort of sardonic, raspy, sarcastic quality to almost everything he says in the episode.
I think the Flying Graysons might have to change their name.
Yeah, I think two spots specifically stood out. One, after the death of the Graysons, they cut to him and he says, well, I guess the Flying Graysons are going to have to give themselves a new name or be renamed or whatever he says. Man, way to cut the tension in that scene. Whew. But yeah, I mean, it underlies the evil nature behind the character, and just that he was out for murder. He was out to kill them and had no remorse whatsoever. And then I think the scene that we mentioned before, where he's throwing the knives at Batman, where he sort of punctuates the fact that the reason why his career ended, because after Batman asks him, he's like, well, why did you stop? And he says, one day I missed. It was like, oof, yikes. So yeah, he's very sinister. At first, I'll be honest, like at first I was like, I think that's Mark Hamill. And then I was like, well, maybe it's not him. Like, and then I was like, oh no, that's definitely Mark Hamill. I did absolutely Mark Hamill. But I like the fact that it wasn't immediate, like it's immediately recognizable if you know to listen to it. But I had forgotten that he played him. And then after I realized, or after I heard Kevin Conroy, I was like, oh, did they do that? Oh, they definitely did that. They got Mark Hamill to play Tony Zuko, and it's just perfect for the episode. No big surprise. Both he and Kevin Conroy knocked it out of the park on their individual performances, and he obviously has a lot more to do because he's the villain of the piece. Yeah, he's sinister and evil in a different way than you're used to with the Joker or. As you mentioned, Solomon Grundy or any of those other vocal performances that he's done. So it's unique enough and it stands out as a different character where it doesn't feel like he's just doing the Joker without the laugh.
Yeah, absolutely. And that'll bring us to our heroes of the piece. We do in a reduced role this week, but we have a little bit of Alistair Duncan as Alfred, who is, like we always have said that Ephraim Zimbalist Jr. is hashtag my Alfred, the favorite that nobody can really touch that role in our hearts. But as far as with Mr. Zimbalist's passing, we still get Mr. Duncan reprising this role even as recently as last year in the Long Halloween movies, which we actually reviewed. So I love him as Alfred, even though he doesn't get a lot to do in this episode. It's always nice to hear him.
Yeah, his talk with Bruce when he has to, again, it's his role to kind of hold Bruce accountable. If Bruce said that he wants to be the Alfred or he wants to be the same role that Alfred was to Bruce after Bruce was going through his mourning period towards Dick, then he kind of holds him accountable to say, hey, if you're going to do this, you gotta step it up. You gotta do something different here. Even if Bruce doesn't take that advice, he at least advocates for it. Hey, I think Dick needs a friend, and in that it conveys it as a heartwarming, just like a parent would if they were offering, or a good parent would, in sharing advice with you. So I think his performance, again, we've talked about it before on the episodes we've covered in the past, and I think his Alfred, while not Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., not hashtag my Alfred, it's great for the role, and it still comes across as the heart of the character, I think.
Absolutely, and that'll bring us to our two main superheroes of the piece. We have the debuting here in this episode, Evan Sabara as Robin, who is had a few acting jobs before this, and I think was actually out of the acting business shortly after this show. Although he did have a recent credit for something. There was nothing from The Batman until 2018, so. Hopefully he's is working a little bit more going forward. But as far as and we've talked about this quite a few times over the years on our show, but it's always it can be a little bit of a crapshoot when you get actual young people or kids in to voice the child characters. But I mean, I think he hits a home run again from the opening bits where he's interacting with Kevin Conroy and Grey Delisle as the happy family kid, and then from having to convey the sorrow and the anger when he's talking to Bruce and Alfred about Zuko, to the end there when he acknowledges that that true justice is not the same as vengeance, and then that sort of things. So it's a lot to ask of a kid, period, but especially I think in their first episode, and I think he does a really good job with it.
Yeah, I think he conveys the emotion. I love the one scene, as I think we talked about, where he's talking with Alfred and Alfred reveals the painting, and he kind of has to switch tones where he's sort of mourning and he looks at his parents and he's thankful that it's there, and then he switches to this sort of he's going to exact justice on Tony Zuko, and I think he adds to that sort of red herring that they did for the character with his performance. And again, we've heard good voice actors, good children voice actors, and maybe not so good children voice actors before across the years of animation that we've been watching. And I think that his performance is absolutely fine for what it is. Robin, I feel like in some ways is supposed to be a little bit annoying, especially teenage Robin, because he's annoying, he's cocky, he makes quips. The villains are supposed to be annoyed by him. So if your teenage Robin isn't at least slightly annoying, I think you're doing something wrong. So not quite in the same way that Damian Wayne is annoying, sure. But he has to be somewhat of a quippy, annoying adolescent. So I think that his performance comes across that way pretty well. So yeah, I would agree with you. A solid performance from him.
Yeah, and there's one line again in that funeral scene that we keep going back to, but when Bruce sort of first approaches him and asks how he's doing, and he just says, "I'll be okay. At least that's what everyone's been telling me." And I just think the way he delivers that, like, he's so cold and detached in that moment, and you really get that feeling of the mix of the sadness and the anger and feeling so alone in that moment, which then leads to speaking of Bruce, Rino Romano once again as Batman and Bruce Wayne in this episode here, who then in reaction to seeing how Dick is at his parents' funeral, sort of immediately wants to spring into action and bring him into the fold. And Rino Romano probably doesn't get a lot to do. There's a lot of exposition of him explaining how he's tracking down Zuko and everything, and some brief interactions with him. But I think he's really good in that funeral scene, and then that final sequence where he's playing off Mark Hamill under the circus tent, and then as we've talked about, that final scene where they're speaking on sort of the edge of the circus grounds about and giving Robin his name and all of that. I think another solid job by this universe's Batman.
Agreed. Yeah, I think because so much of it is a Robin story, he doesn't have as much to do. But I think as Batman, when he's shaking down the criminals in the nightclub, I think is great. He puts a little bit more gruff on his voice than I think we've heard in the past. And then when he's explaining to Dick about what his purpose of being Batman and why he's been absent, and trying to communicate that, and then just sort of no selling what Dick's response is, and wanting to be the person that serves justice is great. And then I think that, again, the interaction between him, anytime there's any interaction between him and Mark Hamill, it's hard not to compare it to Kevin Conroy and Mark Hamill. But for this show and for these two characters from this show, I think he holds his own pretty well. So I thought he did a really solid job overall, especially with the temptation of comparing him to other Batmen interacting with a Mark Hamill voiced character.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think there's a lot of great stuff here across our wide-ranging voice cast. Again, so many familiar names in there. And I ended up settling on an 8 out of 10 for my voice score.
Nice. I went just a tick higher. I think blame it on all of the familiar guest stars and favorite voices here. But I think Mr. Romano's performance also was solid, and I think overall there wasn't too many misses, so I went 9 out of 10 for my score.
Love it.
All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up. So let's total our scores. Totaling everything up at the end for this episode, I end up with a rock solid 32 out of 40. What about you?
Yeah, and I'm just a couple points higher at a 34 out of 40.
All right. When it comes to this series, I say, based on the fact that it's Robin's origin story, this is no doubter. You got to watch this one.
Yeah, I think this is a double thumbs up. It's a really fun, really good episode. It's a good, as we say once in a while, a Robin 101 story. And again, it covers a lot of the ground that Robin's Reckoning does, but tells a more sort of succinct story because it's all kind of happening in the moment, and we don't have the extra bits of Dick going out on his own to try to track down Zuko and all that. So it's a very succinct 22-minute. It's a good introduction to Robin in this series. And yeah, I mean, obviously we've covered a few episodes of the Batman from across the various seasons of the show, but I think so far this is at least from a personal standpoint, this might be my favorite one we've reviewed so far. I think this really stands out, and even though again it doesn't have the nostalgic place in my heart that the classic Batman the animated series episodes do, this one I think this one deserves to stand shoulder to shoulder as far as a great Robin introduction to your series.
Agreed. All right, Liam. Well, that will begin to wrap us up for this week's episode. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Don't forget, if you would like to support the podcast, there's a couple ways you can do that. The first and easiest way is likely supporting us on one of our podcast platforms, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google. We're on all the normal ones. We're also available on our Anchor site. You can subscribe to us on there, or as we mentioned at the top of the episode, you can, of course, subscribe to us on the Pod Tower on YouTube. And if you're on all of those different platforms, just go subscribe to us. That helps. Even if you don't listen to them on those particular platforms, it helps, especially with YouTube. So like our videos on there. That's a free way to support us. You can also follow us on social media at DCAU Review, both on Twitter and Instagram. Twitter, we'll talk about in a second here, but is playing a pivotal role with not only speaking and talking about all things that are happening in the world of DC Comics and the DCAU, but also we have an opportunity for you to let your voice be heard as to what our final week of Robin coverage will be. So tune in for that in just a moment here as we'll discuss. You can, of course, also support us if you want to support us monetarily. There is a link at the bottom of our podcast. You can click on that. It takes you to our Anchor site. You can support us directly there, or you can head over to DCAUreview.com. Not only find our entire archive of episodes, but there is a merch store. You can pick yourself up a shirt. There's some funny, cute DCAU related merch there, inspired merch, I'll say that, for copyright reasons. DCAU inspired merchandise. So you can check that out there. And Liam, as I mentioned just a moment ago, we are letting the fans decide here our final week of Robin coverage as we're coming to an end here of our Elseworlds month of June. We have one final Saturday, but we're letting the fans decide just what we will be covering. So why don't we present to them our options that they have to choose from?
That's right. So of course it will stay in the Robin theme here for another alternate Elseworlds take on the Boy Wonder, but rather than just pick it ourselves, we thought we'd open it up. And we have two choices for you, as you mentioned, Cal. One being a show we've covered a couple of times by now, that being Young Justice. We could revisit another episode of that, perhaps pick an episode later in season one that is a little bit more Robin focused.
Fair to say, if I can just interject, if you want to troll Liam, this Robin, as he's mentioned several times before as we've reviewed these, he hates this version of Robin for some reason. Yes. Just not a fan of
annoying.
He finds him annoying. So if you want to annoy Liam, if you want to be a troll, as I know so many people enjoy being, I say vote for Young Justice. But we do have two options, as we're about to mention.
That's right. Or if you want us to take a crack at something completely different than Young Justice, you could have us end the month talking about a Robin voice actor we've already talked about, but in a different show, that being Scott Menville's Robin in the wonderful and irreverent and still going strong Teen Titans Go. We would maybe pick out at least one, possibly two, since they're the little like 12-minute shorts. We might do two Robin themed episodes of Teen Titans Go, and end the month on a happier note and kind of bookend us with the Teen Titans that started us off and the Teen Titans Go to finish us off. I love that idea, but we are going to leave it up to the fans. And if you make me review Robin and Young Justice, I promise not to be too upset about it.
I thought you were about to swear revenge on them. So thank you. Thank you for promising not to be too upset.
No, but I mean, just now I will hold it against you. But
You'll add it to the list.
I'll it'll be a little you're that now is not the time for fear. That comes later.
I know you haven't gotten over the fact that they didn't vote for Iron Man 94
or the Channing Tatum dog movie.
That's right,
which was really what I wanted to review for April Fools.
Our last poll did not go your way. So yes,
no, it did not.
So head over to twitter.com and find us at DCAU Review to let your voice be heard. You may either troll Liam with your vote. Heck, if you want to sign up for multiple accounts and stuff the ballot box, there's no rules that say you can't do that. So if you have multiple Twitter accounts, you can vote more than once here. This isn't an election. You can vote more than once. So go for it. Go for it. All right.
Fingers crossed. Fingers crossed.
It's either way, whatever we review next week, it is bound to be a blast. I can't wait to check that out. But until then, I am Cal.
And I'm Liam.
And we will talk to you on the next episode, whatever it is, of the DCAU Review.
Bye-bye.